We can start, I think. We're gonna have an hour of discussion. So before lunch, so 20 to 2 p.m. I guess we're gonna be done. I just wanted to maybe go over very quickly over what each speaker said, very quickly in a few sentences to sort of recap and maybe refresh your memory, and then we can switch to questions and answers and discussion. We had Professor Vali talking about Iran. He talked about the political struggles in Iran over the constitution, starting with the last century. And he stressed that the Iranian constitution has this paradoxical nature, wherein it has democratic elements and theocratic elements. And he also said that these sort of signify the political struggles in the country between secularists and the religious political forces right now. And this is the conflict in the country right now. Professor Sinclair, he talked about Syria and the historical process there of constitution making. And he talked about opposition groups, Kurds mainly, which is the biggest opposition group and biggest ethnic minority in Syria. And he talked about the conflict between the Arab nationalism and the Arab nationalist character of the state and institutions, and Kurdish struggle for rights. And he sort of stressed how these are still similar. Historically, the demands and the fears associated with them, fears of disintegration and such, they're sort of still lingering today. And he said that it's going to require a whole restructuring of the state, as well as a new constitution if and when Assad falls. And then we had Mr. Wali from the Kurdistan regional government, who talked about how for the Kurds, this is a multi-dimensional issue, because it's not just the federal government, it's Iraq, and then it's neighboring countries where Kurds also live. And then he also said, federalism in Iraq is not exactly working. In fact, he said it's confederalism. And even though I believe this is in your paper, you say, federalism is the future system for the entire world, but it's not working in Iraq, and Iraq is going towards disintegration. And he talked a bit about why that is and why the two nationalities can't and won't live together successfully. And then Mr. Çandar brought it back to Turkey and talked about, with the Arab awakening or the uprisings or the Arab Spring, how Turkey is sort of put forward as an example for some of these countries, especially Tunisia and Egypt, and how Turkish foreign policy had to change in light of these developments, but also now how the Turkish constitution making is going to be a very important exam basically for Turkey if it wants to remain an example, and because others in the region are looking up to Turkey, this constitution is going to sort of show or prove to what extent this being exemplary can be justified. So these are the points that I noted down, but I'm sure you remember other things that you want to talk about. So there's going to be a microphone, right? Microphone? Orada. Tamam. So, yes, please. If you can say your name and then your question.
Teşekkür ederim.
Yes, thank you very much. My name is Zafer Üskül. I'm a teacher at Doğuş University. We are discussing the Middle East, North Africa, and Turkey with regard to the writing of a new constitution. Actually, maybe I should have talked in the afternoon because that would have been more relevant. It will be more than a question, with your permission. Today, we are not discussing Morocco. However, in 2011, as in the case of Tunisia and Egypt and other countries, also in Morocco, there was a trial to uprise. The people in Morocco tried to make an uprising too. They have transborder problems like the Western Sahara, and also there are problems created by the different ethnic groups. Therefore, there is a search for a spring also in Morocco. And on the 20th of February 2011, there was a major demonstration prepared. But immediately afterwards, on the 9th of March, the king came up with the promise of a new constitution. They established a commission, and in June, they prepared the constitution, and it was adopted and promulgated as of July last year. So there was a change there, and finally, it was quite an open and democratic constitution in Morocco, accepting the Berberi language as the second language even. So it was to an unexpected degree a very revolutionary constitution, guaranteeing the rights of women, for instance, and putting the international conventions that the Morocco has signed to become superior to the national legislation. And also the importance of the king is diminished. It is also foreseeing the responsibility of the king towards the parliament and its people. Although Morocco is an Islamic country, the source of the constitution is to be found in the national sovereignty and the people's will. Obviously, the rights, the languages of minority have been put under protection in the new constitution, and a different important characteristic is that it foresees an advanced decentralization. Not only the decentralization as foreseen by Mr. Çandar, no, it is an advanced centralization that they are now implementing. So this could be an example, or let me put it like that, it contains elements that would be an example to other countries trying to prepare a new constitution. Thank you very much.
And I have a question for Mr. Sinclair regarding Syria. Purity of origins. I think that some revolutions, and in particular the Syrian revolution, do find it useful to use part of their country's previous history, a specific phase in their history, as points of reference and maybe sources for inspiration in their struggle against the current regime. In the case of Syria, we see, for instance, that some prominent opposition lawyers and human rights defenders say we could indeed draw on earlier constitutions, like the constitution of 1950, to see how the current Syrian state should be crafted. Of course, they would go beyond the old texts, but they would certainly take them into consideration as their point of reference. In a visual sense, we see that the Syrian revolution is using a specific flag as their national symbol now, which is the flag that was in use before the unification between Egypt and Syria. It's this green, white, black flag, as opposed to the current red, white, black flag that is the current flag of Syria. So this is also a sign. This is also a sign that this specific phase is used for inspiration, and it's not only used by the Arab opposition but also by the Kurdish opposition. So, for instance, anti-regime demonstrations in the Kurdish northeast do use not only the Kurdish flag but also this pre-unification Syrian flag, the green, white, black flag. I would like to ask you, do you think this is useful, or do you think this is rather like conjuring up a myth of pure origins that would not hold the test of reality? My sense is that maybe at the current moment it is a necessary tool to ensure that the revolutionary movement has a point to refer to in terms of the unity of the nation, because otherwise it might just lead to a splitting up of the various components of Syrian society after the fall of the regime. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you for that question. I think I think I've got the gist of it. And I think what we see in many examples is looking back into former constitutions, looking at perhaps pieces that can be pulled out. But really, whether it's the Constitution of 1950 or 1930, 1964, 1973, I don't think that there's really anything there in Syria's constitutional history that would work today in 2012 for the country. I think it needs to be broken, as I mentioned before, completely scrapped and started over again rather than picking out pieces from before. In addition to that, the state structures need to be dismantled and reformed. You mentioned the flags. From what I understand from friends in the region, what we're seeing is these symbols of the state, symbols of unity in the flags and also in the slogans. You hear Kurds who are shouting in Arabic, "Sha'b al-Suri wahid," the Syrian people are one. You hear every Friday that these Fridays are named different things. One was Ina Azadi, the Friday of Freedom in Kurdish, where the Arabs were actually using that. So you have these symbols that are being used, whether they're flags or slogans, I think, to show that unity. But I don't think you're going to find it in previous constitutions.
Soru sorarken ayağa kalkabilirsek çekim yapıldığı için.
Could you please stand up when you answer your question, because we are having a audiovisual recording. My question is to Mr. Çandar. I have difficulty in the recent engagement of Turkey's. I don't think that the religious sects were not that prominent at any time of Turkish foreign policy. The engagement is mainly on the Sunni sect. Yes, there are Kurds in Syria, and everybody would like, Turkey would not like them to get a special status. But other than that, beyond universal standards, we see that Turkey is engaging herself on the basis of religious beliefs. And the reformist and democratic position Turkish government has abandoned that for a year now, and they are now exerting major pressure on the Kurdish people. And the world is watching it, and it remains silent. There are almost 7,000 people in jail right now in Turkey, and nobody is raising an objection or questioning this. This, what I call, is political genocide, in my opinion. So in Yüksekova, the simple civilians, shop owners, tradespeople, they are now being collected and jailed as well. We have to question this. Turkey is again assuming the nature of an undemocratic country. How would you interpret this? Is there maybe another reason that I don't see? This is a difficult question. Well, I just made I can answer your question by making only an analysis. I cannot say or shouldn't say anything as a representative of Turkey. I don't represent Turkey here, I represent myself. Secondly, from how you put your question, I understand that the owner of the question is also have also a critical approach to Turkey's present position. Well, the government might be very upset when they hear what I'm going to say, but actually Turkey is learning many things while on the road. They are trying to find out or to do what is impossible, and when they see that it is not doable, then they make a fine-tune on the way. And what we call the Arab Spring right now was something unexpected everywhere in the world. It was not expected in the United States, and equally it was totally unexpected in Turkey. Although there are storytellers who say that behind the whole thing is the United States, and on the 15th of March in Syria, 15th March 2011, the incidents in Syria started then, and almost for a year now, many people went on the street knowing that they would be killed as part of the game. So if this is a game, then these people will lose their lives. Why? Because some other foreign country told them to do so. This is a fallacy. I mean, this I can't believe. So, but and Turkey has been caught in this wave. On the one hand, Turkey has a pro-change government structure because they represented an objection, and that's how they came to power in 2002. And they really realized change in the country, and that's why they could augment their votes at every election. So, it took its position vis-à-vis the incidents in Tunisia and Egypt from that background, which you couldn't do in the case of Syria, because we have the problem of the Kurdish people and the Alawites in Turkey. So the governor, the foreign minister, Ahmet Davutoğlu, uses the word Nusayri for the Syrians. And when we call them Alevi, no, he corrects. They say, no, Alevis, that's different. These are the Nusayri people. So what angers him most about Syria what angers the Syrian most is that they are not called Alevites, but Nusayris. So the fact that Ahmet Davutoğlu makes that sect distinction is an indication. So they do not want to put the two groups into the same category. Therefore, it makes the difference with the Nusayris. But at the same time, there are Nusayris also in Turkey, in Hatay, for instance. So from the very beginning, Turkey has been very careful not to assume a position that is based on the sects, but the image they give is totally the contrary. And an example from my experience, as an answer to your question, I can say that last year, when we went with Prime Minister Erdogan to Iraq, after Baghdad, we visited first Necef, and then we went to Erbil, and then we came back to Turkey. In Necef, there is the tomb of Prophet Ali. Obviously, it was visited. But the political purpose for going to Necef was to go to Merce-i Taklit Tusi, Ayetullah Ali Sistani, who is one of the most prominent figures of the Shiites in Iraq, and that is important because he is to the Velayet-i Faqih doctrine in Iran. And it is a major, he has a major influence about the other Shiites in other countries. So the meeting with the prime minister and this personality gave the message towards Iran, saying that you are following a sect-based policy, which I don't. So I am having a meeting at prime minister level with a religious political leader. And the second message was to Ayetullah Sistani, saying that if the developments in the region would convert into a war amongst regions, that will be the disaster of all of us. So do anything you can in your power in order to prevent that. That was the message that the Prime Minister Erdogan wanted to convey. So it was very symbolic. And that was the third visit to Prime Minister Erdogan to Baghdad. And for the Sunnis and Hanefis in Turkey, one of the most important sites is the tomb of Ebru Hanifi. First, he wanted to go to Ebu Hanifi's tomb and then to Necef. But what is symbolically important is that first, he went to the tomb of Imam Musa Kazım. So there is a bridge between the two tombs. The one is the Kazimiye, and the other one of the side of the bridge is the Azamiye. So first they were supposed to go to Azimiye and then to Kazimiye, but no, he didn't do that. He went first to Kazimiye and then to Azamiye, and then he crossed the bridge again and went to Necef. So all this were signals that Turkey was not assuming a sect-based position. And this is what had to happen if Turkey wants to be a power in the region, because he has to act as a power which is beyond and above all religious sects. Because in every square centimeter of the Middle East, there is the competition between Turkey and Iran. So that was all related to this fact. But the incidents in Syria, obviously, what we call the Arab Spring, they were all in the Sunni area, Tunisia, Libya, Egypt. But what we call the Syrian people, where 75% are Sunnis. And this is a place where they have very close relations with Turkey. And the regime is massacring exactly these people. And the core of the AK Party in Turkey is the religious Sunni people. And Syria is massacring in their own country exactly these groups. And also the non-Arab actors, Iran and Turkey, should be the leading powers. But we have the Shiite and Sunni rivalry between Turkey and Iran, which dates back to the long years in the history. So Turkey's new position automatically emerged from, and that was not a chosen policy, but it is a policy that historical dynamics force Turkey to do. And the only way for Turkey to overcome this position, which I try to apply, is to have a proper new constitution, because that will be a social contract, and this should be a really democratic constitution, being beyond all religious beliefs and sects, which will be open also to the Kurdish people. This is the only way to save Turkey itself from the present position, which it did not assume on its own free will. Thank you.
Microphone, please.
If it's a follow-up, please go ahead, yeah.
No, sorry, I didn't want to precede you, sir. I only wanted just to continue with a question to you. You see, I'm asking from a European background, German background. And we, of course, if we analyze in our history those wars which we know as the religious wars, 30 years of utter awful violence between Catholics and Protestants, there we can analyze that these religious things were only, let's say, they of course were important because they could incite emotions, but the reasons for these wars and the destruction were political, European political reasons. And I'm not quite sure that I understood you right. Do you really feel that, let's say, the Sunni, Shia and sect questions could be essential elements of the tensions in these regions, or are they not predominantly political ones?
I think they are not mutually exclusive. There's a profound religious schism between the two main sects, Sunnis and Shia, but definitely that already existing schism, which is very, very profound, which goes to the very early days of Islam, actually, is used for political ends. But they are intertwined. They are intertwined. So just looking at it as a source of manipulation by a certain political entity should not suggest that deep in the psyche or the subconscious of the societies in the Middle East, whether they are Shia and Sunni, this centuries-long animosity do not exist. It exists. The political actors make use of it for political ends, but they exist. Iraq, for example, the carnage in Iraq after the American occupation between 2003 and the year 2010, for 7 years, there are very many exaggerated figures. 1 million people got killed, which is around, still, it's a very important figure, but real figures is something between around 150,000 or so. It's very, very big. But 90% of those who got killed are not killed by Americans or fighting against Americans. 90% of those killed is the product of Shia-Sunni fighting, the internecine fighting within Iraq, which shows us the deep historical background of this sectarian schism in the region. Plus now we have the political actors making use of them.
Five questions.
Yeah. Sorry, this issue of Sunni and Shia in Iraq and Iran, it is clearly important, but it's fundamentally political. Iraqi Shias are very different to Iranian Shias in terms of their historical origin and in terms of their formation. Iraqi Shiism is very new, 18th century. bulk of Iraqi Shias are very newcomers. And in Iran, it has a much longer history. But what is also missing here, which is making this, if you like, a religious war, is, in my opinion, is not discussed here, and it is the extremely negative influence of Saudi Arabia. This extremely negative influence of Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia would do anything for not have another Shia government in Iraq, not a repetition of Iranian case. And I would say, from what I know, they should be held responsible for bulk of this violence which is going on there. But fundamentally, I agree with my German friend that this is a religious veneer for a very deeply rooted political divisions. And of course, religion has been mobilized. I mean, we have seen in Europe, contemporary Europe, in Northern Ireland, yeah, that how religion was mobilized for political ends. Yes.
Thank you. Yeah, Jay.
My question is for Mr. Wali. So you started by saying that Iraqi Kurds experience more rights than, say, in comparison to Turkish, Iranian, Syrian Kurds. Oh, sorry. Wali. So that Iraqi Kurds comparatively have more rights, but that in general they still feel they don't have enough safeguards. And then you ended by saying that the project of federalism in Iraq has failed, and you fear we're heading towards a bloody separation. So I wonder, what in your opinion do you feel needs to be done for federalism in Iraq to be successful? And is that even a desirable goal for Iraq and for Kurds in Iraq?
In Iraq, there is a basic problem, the problem being that there is no thing called the Iraqi people, because there's no such identity. Everyone is basing itself on his own identity. People in Iraq declare themselves as being this or that identity, depending on what they feel. In the elections, what the Americans wanted to do was to have like an AK Party model, where a party would get votes from the north, from the south, and everywhere, whereas the Kurds voted for the Kurds, Turkomans for the Turkomans, the Assyrians for the Assyrians, the Shiites for the Shiites, the Sunnis for the Sunni groups. So no one really voted for a different ethnic group. The Turkomans didn't vote. Well, they voted al-Iraqiyya, where they had a contingent for themselves. So this was all previously discussed amongst them. Because there's no Iraqi people, and because there are three major groups of people in Iraq, things are different. And so this is a group which has had to get together, and it's been together for many years now, but after 1991, this whole issue took on a different turn for the Kurds, and this is something that has to be taken into consideration within the constitution. The Arabs, I apologize for saying this, but in the minds of the Arabs, when you speak of federalism, you're talking about secession. This puts you, in other words, as in a separatist position if you start talking about federalism. This is what the Arabs think, and this has to do with their history, with the Arab history, their psychology. 52% of the world is governed through federalism, and federalism is perhaps the system of the future. there are people around the world of different ethnic origins and creed, race, and we see that the world, in many countries in the world, are mosaics of people. There are different people of different background. In Iraq, the issue is that people don't believe in federalism. If you ask anyone in Iraq what federalism means in Iraq, they say that that means to separate, to divide. And that's why the federal system has failed, and it has taken on a different character. And in my opinion, the Kurdistan region has a confederal structure and in its relations with the central government in Baghdad. Why? Because after 2005, the federal structures did not emerge in Iraq, and there is no Kurdish region, no Arab region. There's Iraq only, the central government in Iraq, and this is said to be a federal system. But there are also disagreements between political groups. I'll give you an example. Sadr was against federalism at the beginning. Why? Because their biggest support comes from Medina al-Sadr in Baghdad. In the southern cities, Sadr is not so influential. Al-Hakim group supported federalism because they did not have any problem with respect to Baghdad. They were strong in their own area. So all of this also has to do with where political groups get their votes from. And the political groups have also shaped the developments, in other words. It's not just the people.
Thank you very much. Well, first I want to compliment all the speakers for their deep and comprehensive presentations in relation to the subjects they actually covered. I have no question, but I have a comment. I think while the issues covered was deep and comprehensive, as I said, in relation to dealing with the Arab Spring issues, I think they were not that deep. They did not go to the real issues. The issues were first summarized in one, which is the minority discrimination against minorities and the division among sects, and then it was even limited to one single issue, actually. And I think to understand and to be able to give advices and enlighten to how to drive successful constitutions for the region, that we need to go to really to the grievances and aspirations that moved the people in those regions and brought them to the streets and make them accept the sacrifices they have to take in order to make the changes that they did. And those grievances and aspirations are far beyond just a single issue related to a minority rights, even though it is very important. People who moved to the street are everybody, are the majority and the minorities. And they were all subjected to even the discrimination against the minorities was in part of the tactics of the governments in order to implement its political strategy. It is not, in some cases, it is not a reflection of the will and interest of the people. It's a reflection of the deliberate government policies. So, and the revolt of the people was in part against even those policies, which divided the people and deprived the minorities and created the divide between the people. I think if we to really be able to provide advices and insights in how constitutions in these regions should be developed and should be. We need to go to actually what are the real grievances that were in this region, and what is the political and power dynamics that is taking place, what is actually there, and what is the direction, the potential direction to build and to move toward the future. What are the alternatives that are open for the people, and how to deal them? What is the dynamics that can? I think even the religious conflict between sects and between groups in the region, to a large extent, see, when they are not always alive, they are not always part, a cause of alive problems or a conflict, but they become a source of conflict when, as sometimes we don't know why. And actually, we know why. We know because in the political strategies and political tactics of the regime, they become actual rule for this division to exist. And that's why they come to life and they work themselves in one way or another. In other words, a fair, a just, a progressive constitutions and atmosphere of governance, I think will automatically, will not eliminate those, will not make the Shia not Shia, will not make the Sunni not Sunni, will not make, but will make them able to coexist like everybody else and everyone else in the world in a peaceful and constructive manner, and become part of a community, of a society that can work together efficiently and effectively towards the future. So I think we need to go deep into, first, what is the power structure in these regions? How it works in reality? What are the alternative direction of controlling and dictating future development and interaction in this? And then how this can be, made to a constitutional, principles and laws and so on. So thank you.
Teşekkür ederim.
Thank you. I don't know if I have to stand up or I should stand up, but one of the previous speakers did, so I'm going to do that. My name is Metin Karataş. I'm a lawyer, a member of the Istanbul Bar Association, but I'm not representing the Bar Association here. I have a question to Kerim Wali, and then also some question to Abbas Wali. Kerim Wali, in his presentation, said that the Kurdistan region has a constitution. And I'm asking this question in a way so as to give you support. Can you give us more information about this constitution in the Kurdistan region? What does it include about minorities, for example? And I believe that in Turkey, too, in the new constitution, we will have to consider these issues. And what kind of measures does it include about minorities? And question to Abbas Wali. There is some movement in Iran. We all know this. And doesn't society have some constitutional demands currently in Iran? After 1992, the Iraqi forces all withdrew from Kurdistan region, and we had a parliamentary election to govern the region, and many laws were enacted. Iraq's constitution, Article 141, approved all of the laws which were passed in Kurdistan, saying that they were not in conflict with the Iraqi constitution. In the 1990s, Kurds also tried to put together a constitution. There was a discussion about this in the Turkish media as well, because the discussion here was that the Kurds are ready for independence. They even have their constitution. This In fact, regions have the right to enact their laws. So in June 2009, a draft of the constitution passed from the Kurdistan parliament, but it was not put to the referendum. It was supposed to have been put to the referendum in months' time, but it wasn't done. In that constitution, we don't use the word minority. We say other ethnic groups. We have education in 5 languages. Turkomans have, Syrians have quotas. They have 11 seats, and then so 1 Armenian, 5 Turkoman, 5 Kaldanis, and Assyrians have seats in the parliament. So there are these quotas. The total parliament is a little over 100, and there's Turkoman is a second language, so education is provided in those languages. In Turkoman areas, they have autonomous rights according to this constitution, and this constitution also has says that it's a constitutional right to practice one's sect and forms of prayer and so on.
Well, the talk I gave, I mostly focused on the structure of power, its distribution, the struggles around the competing conceptions of power in the constitution and how they were formed. I did not get down to issues of what exactly the various aspects of the constitution were about, nor I looked at the idea of constitutional reform very much inside society because of the time. Now, there is clearly a demand for the constitutional reform in Iran. This demand is raised from various directions and from among various sectors of the population. The constitution of the Islamic Republic, it is fair to say, is ethnic blind. It is gender blind. It doesn't see gender issues in terms of rights and entitlements. It doesn't see ethnicity in terms of certain rights and entitlements and it doesn't recognize those differences. For instance, the Kurdish issue or the ethnic issue, not just the Kurds, because there are Azeris, there are Baluchis, there are Turkomans, and the Kurds are one of them. The second largest after Azeris, in fact, are the largest in Iran in terms of an ethnic grouping. I don't like the term minority. I hate it. I don't use it. So the grouping that I am saying, ethnic grouping or ethnic sector, that they are there. The Constitution, Articles 15 and 19 of Iranian Constitution, 1.5 and 1.9, does address this issue in terms of recognition of what it calls local languages and local cultures. Local languages and local cultures must be given the right to be spoken and written alongside the Persian language, which is constitutionally the official language. Shiism, 12er Shiism, is the official religion constitutionally, which means that about nearly 20% of Iranian population who are not Sunni Muslims, Shi'i Muslims, are not part of this official identity. The same would go in terms of language for Azeris, for Baluchis, for Kurds, for Turkomans. And there they don't talk about these languages in terms of ethnicity, in terms of their identity. They talk about local languages, and there should be given the right to be used alongside Persian in primary education. Thus far, none of this has been realized. There is no education in there is only in certain ways, like here, that you can see that Kurdish can be taken as an elective course in university, as an elective course. There is no degree in Kurdish, so to speak. But there are publications, so on. It is under, specific control of the government. So there is a great deal of demand for constitutional change among the religious groupings, which are not Shiites, among the Azeris and Baluchis. But the larger aspect of it, which I referred to, is the call, the demand, the central and absolutely pivotal demand for restructuring and changing of the constitution. And this demand really focuses on changing the structure and identity and organization of power in Iran, which, as it was very rightly mentioned by Christian here, raising such a demand would go down to the heart of the existing state, which means that if you raise such a demand, you basically say that I do not want this system. I want this system to be changed, and without changing that system, it would be impossible to carry out such a radical constitutional reform.
Thanks. Sanam, sen bir şey sorabilir misin? I had, yes, that one.
Benim de sorum...
My name is Sanem Güner. I come from Holding Center, which is a think tank. I have a question to Rebwar as well. It's a continuation of the previous question. Can you tell us a little bit more about different political dynamics within the Kurds in the north of Iraq, in the Kurdistan regional administration? Because to us, looking from the outside, we think of it as being rather monolithic, which it probably isn't. So what are the political dynamics within the Kurds in Iraq, and how does this play out in the making of the constitution and in the political processes? So this is my first question. And the second question about the relations with the Syrian Kurds. What kind of mechanisms exist? How do you communicate with the Syrian Kurds? Or I shouldn't maybe limit this to just the Syrian Kurds, because I just said this because Syria is very much on the topic, but on the agenda. But generally speaking, what about your dynamics for communication with Kurds in other parts of the geography? So how practically does it work? Difficult question, as Cengiz Çandar said in response to a question before. It would take hours to talk about the answers. But before 1991, there was the Kurdish Front, and after 1992, this front got in power. This was actually two main parties, KDP and KYP. And then there were some Islamic groups, communist groups, but these were smaller. And these groups did not clear the 7% threshold in the 1992 elections. The smaller groups didn't. And then with the civil war, there was a division within the Kurdistan region. KDP and KYP had two different regions. They managed these, governed these regions separately. And then in 2005, they got back together. But this is still a work in progress. And with the freeing of Iraq, there is now an opposition in Kurdistan. They were originally Islamic groups, and they were getting 10% of the vote, and they were weaker, and they were entering the government with KDP and KYP, and they had a low profile. But in 2009, in the July elections, a new group called Goran came about, and as a result of alliance between KDP and KYP, they got 59% of the vote, and they're still in government. And this was the time when the draft constitution was passed from the parliament, and the opposition in the parliament objected to this constitution, saying that this should not be the way the constitution would be made and that it had to be a national document. So that's why the referendum, which was supposed to have taken place a month later, was not carried out. So Goran, which is the opposition group, doesn't have all these votes, and they did not put this draft as in a referendum. So they took the objections into consideration. But in February 2010, with the Arab Spring, in Süleymaniye, people were on the streets for 62 days asking for reform. They wanted change, corrections. They wanted the constitution to go back to the parliament, and they wanted fight against corruption. So these are the demands of the people, and Mesut Barzani took, by taking these demands into consideration, established a commission and started punishing people around him, and this made people happy to a certain extent, but it's an ongoing process. And the opposition is strong, still strong. And the opposition can take laws which are enacted in parliament for discussion. They create discussion in the media and within the non-governmental organizations. For example, there was a law about demonstrations. And this law consists of 11 articles. One of the articles said that permission had to be taken from the governor's office 24 hours before the demonstration. They objected to this article, and they want just notification, no granting of permission. So the article says that the governor's office has to give permission. But they wanted to remove that. They just said notification within 24 hours of the demonstration, and this they managed to do. So there's no permission aspect to demonstrations. Another point, on Sunday, there was a roundtable with Mr. Barzani when he came back from the US and from Turkey, and we talked about Syria. They're a little passive, I think, on Syria. The regional actors, the two big regional actors, are in conflict with each other, but there are also some regional actors which are their extensions, and KDP, FPK, if we define PKK as a regional actor, then it's Iran's extended actor, and Barzani is for Turkey. So these two other regional actors, as extensions of the two main rival forces or rival countries, are also in conflict with each other. And so if some sort of agreement can be reached, then we can take a position. But if there's no position, if we cannot reach an internal agreement, then we cannot really be an actor in what's happening in Syria. Well, we have 10 minutes left, this gentleman, and then the gentleman in the back will just take those questions. And quickly, please. We're talking about the Ottomans, the Shiites, the Sunni, and we're talking about problems which have existed hundreds of years, and if we can resolve them on a constitutional platform, this would be great. But I think that as I listen to all these discussions, what about the rights of women and the gay community? I'm not just talking about other ethnic identities or ethnic identities, in other words. I'm talking about individual freedoms. What about individual freedoms? Aren't we going to be discussing individual freedoms? Because the problems you're talking about are problems which have not been solved in the last 700, 800, 900 years, maybe. We will try to solve them perhaps through the technique of the constitution making. But so what about women and the gay people? I asked this question to Abbas, Wali, and also to Rebwar too. What about them in this whole picture? In the sense of individual rights. Microphone, please.
I answered this question in the context of the Constitution. This can be answered in the context of the larger politics of Iran, but that takes too much water. It is different. So what I am basically answering here is gender and what may be called sexual difference has been seen in the Constitution. I said the Constitution is gender blind, insofar as gender can become the basis for specific rights and entitlements, you see. And in terms of family law, in terms of penal code, and so on and so forth, the fundamental source of legislation is Islam, in family law and in terms of penal code. And this said, Islamic Republic in Iran is fairly paradoxical sort of entity. This said, you cannot say that these kind of restrictions that exist in the Constitution has stopped women employment or their participation in the economic and political life of the country. It has not. There has been, in fact, an encouragement, but it's a guided encouragement in specific directions. You see, for instance, they are very much restrictive there was a movement called 1 million signatures, which a women's movement were collecting signatures in relation to the recognition of women's rights and so on and so forth. Government was imposing serious restrictions. Still now, some of the activists of this movement, very successful movement, are in prison. But on the other hand, government is encouraging its own, if you like, values, its own, if you like, interest in the direction of mobilization of women. In terms of employment of women, participation of women in political life, in sort of administration, and so on and so forth. For instance, if you take women out of primary education in Iran, it will collapse, because overwhelming majority of the teachers are women. You see, and government does recognize this, that cannot run the primary education in Iran without the help of women, but tries to frame it, okay, and guide it, imposes its values on it, but there are areas which activity of women are strictly forbidden. That is when they are raising the question of gender equality, and so on and so forth, which either impinges on the established religious values, or it is creating a situation for government which, if the government comes to address those ideas, differences, it will open up a serious sort of confrontation. So that. And insofar as the right of the gay people are concerned in Iran, it is total ban. It is absolutely total ban. That it is not recognized, as you remember, when Ahmadinejad went to the Columbia University, to Columbia University to speak there, he was asked this very question. And his answer was that we don't have gays in Iran. You see, that was his answer. But maybe that's what he believes that day, I don't know. But this is basically, so this is not just not recognized, it is kind of anathema in Iran, you see. But having said that, there is another direction. For instance, they're very open about recognizing the necessity of sex change. I watched a program, a BBC program on this very issue. I think it's BBC or Channel 4 in London. I watched it. It is that actually sex change sort of clinics in Tehran are sort of increasing in number. And the demand for sex change, some would say that, I've also read articles say that this is also an expression of sort of sexual repression of gender repression, that some would want to change sex because of this, even if they are not clinically, if they are not, if you like, medically identified as people being on the borderline. They go and say that they want to become a man, because to be a man in Islamic Republic is much better. You see, this is now. I don't want to carry this to an extreme. They said that I have read things indicating this, but I'm not saying that this is true or not. But in coming back to there is that you can't, not there in constitution, nor in any other legal document, nor in terms of the dominant prevailing Shia culture, you can in any way raise the gay issue.
Thank you, Professor Vali. I'll take both of... Hızlıca cevap verelim.
Let's take 3 questions together and then let's answer them.
Thank you. I have 2 direct questions to Mr. Çandar. The first question, I have to phrase it well to make it clear. You are quite right, the influence of Egypt over the Arab world for decades. You have mentioned the importance and influence of Turkey and Iran in the Arab world. When it comes to the comparison between Egypt and Tunisia in terms of Islamic influence, from my point of view, I think there are quite different Islamic movements in these 2 countries, even the origin is the same. But in Egypt, they are more conservative and more fundamentals from the early 20th century. We have seen the exercise of power, theological power of Islamist Muslim brothers in Egypt in 1926 in Al-Qahira University when they called Taha Hussein apostate. And this continued up to the moment. Lately, 3 days ago, the well-known artist Adil Imam have been put in jail. So the question, the dominance of Islamists in Egypt, how do you see their influence in rewriting the constitution in Egypt and its influence in the uprising countries? This is the first question. The second question, you have said also, you have mentioned the competition between Iran and Turkish in the Arab world, and which is true. How do you describe the competition between Turkey and Saudi Arabia over the Islamic world and Arab world? And where are the positive points you see in this competition? Thank you. The competition between Turkey and Saudi Arabia.
Cengiz Bey, diğer soruları da aralım, siz onları bir aklınızda tutun. Şu beyefendi, bir de beyefendiden, ondan sonra...
Ben Azad Zal, Kürt Yazarlar Derneği'nden.
I would like to ask make a statement about the concept of Kurdish problem. I think that is an improper concept and it has to be abandoned in future because in South Kurdistan was called Northern Iraq, and the Kurdish problem is a concept that has been determined from the outside. It should be mentioned as the Kurdish cause or the Kurdish struggle. Now my question to Rebwar. I would like this question to be answered by a person who is Kurdish. since the beginning of the last century, since the borders were determined, Kurdistan was disintegrated, and the process of constitution started both in Iraq, in Turkey, in Syria. Either Kurds were neglected or they were added up, and then they were oppressed as a result of the Kurdish struggle. And this is the case also today. This is how the Arab Spring, it seems to me, the opposition in Syria and in is still disregarding Kurds. The same happened in Iraq. So how do you see whether the Kurds can be included in the constitutional process? And if they were to do so in Iran, Syria, and Egypt, what kind of a reaction would it see, and what would be the result of this vis-à-vis the Kurds? The last question. My name is Mansur. My question is to Christian, to Mr. Sinclair. As you know, in the continental Europe, particularly after the Renaissance and after the Commonwealth, for 400 years now, they are moving very slowly in democracy. With regard to ethnicity, feudal feuds, how will the democracy be established in the Middle East? Because democracy in the West was established, could be established through the agreement of different social groups. Can we be hopeful for the same to happen in the Middle East too? Second question. In the Gulf countries, why isn't there any Arab Spring there? And why is the spring attempt in Bahrain been suppressed? Yes, very briefly, we have to conclude in 5 minutes, and then we have to go to lunch. In the first question directed to me was the comparison between Egypt and Tunisia and the historical roots of the Islamic movement in Egypt. That was mentioned, and it was defined as more radical and more conservative. That is true. That is correct. And in every country of the Arab Spring, they all have similarities, similar characteristics, but they also have major differences. Tunisia is coming from a very, very different historical background. Both countries were in the past under Ottoman rule, and then Tunisia went into the rule and control of France. And their state structure has also Kemalistic features. And after the establishment of 1926 of the Muslim Brothers in Egypt, they have had a different movement. So the common point between the two countries is that very recently, they demolished totalitarian structures. Hosni Mubarak in Egypt and also in Tunisia, the president was overthrown. Although they were coming from a different background and very different regimes, there was a point in which they could meet, and also the election results were similar. The mainstream Islamic movements won in the elections in Ihwan in Egypt. Now, trying to answer your question from all these starting points, well, I also have to say, actually, is that Egypt, the population in Egypt is structurally conservative. When you compare it with the Tunisian society, the Egyptian society in itself is conservative. And that is also reflected upon the recent elections. This was the real picture of the Egyptian society. So how could that be seen in the preparation of the constitution? This is what is under discussion. Because it has also similarities to Turkey, because we have had a military regime in 1980s too, but they declared themselves as a transitory regime from the very beginning, and in a very short period they prepared the constitution of 1982, and then they immediately held elections and the regime was normalized. Will it be like that? Because in Egypt, the Egyptian army and the generals, also they start every discourse with Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. This is unthinkable for Turkey. Could you imagine that any general or any soldier, even in the Turkish army, would start his or her statement with Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim? No. But because now they have a transition period, and because they had the possibility of coming to power, the Islamists in Egypt were forced to abide by certain democratic parameters, and they had to reflect them in the constitution. This is nothing harmful. And the movements that we could call jihadi movements, they were also having their origin in the Muslim brothers like Sayyid Qutb. Even then, they say it was marginal. These groups were in the Muslim brothers, but they were not in the mainstream. So this is like the difference between the AK Party and Refah Party in our case. This is what we would expect from the constitutional movements in Egypt now. The competition between Turkey and Saudi Arabia, that is a competition which Saudi Arabia is and cannot be winning, because one of them is Wahhabi, and they are using their oil richness in order to expand the Wahhabi sect. However, the buyers of Wahhabi sect are very limited. It is creating important results, but in the Islamic world, this is not a trend that could be generally accepted. The Wahhabis have always been a very small group. And the value of Turkey here is also important from this particular point of view. In the checks and balances in the main importance of Turkey is that Turkey is now decreasing the power of Saudi Arabia as the representative of the Sunni belief in the Islam. So this competition is a beneficial competition, and it is a competition where there is no possibility whatsoever for Saudi Arabia to win. Now, the last question, why isn't there any Arab Spring in Bahrain? Well, we can't make it a condition that if something happens here, it has to happen elsewhere too. No, these are historical developments. It happened in Egypt. Why? Because it was an autocratic regime. It is happening in Syria. Why? There was a similar regime there. In the Gulf, There are not vastly democratic structures, but they have a different reality, because in most of the Gulf countries, the majority of the people living there are not natives of those countries, but the Indians, the Pakistanis, others who were attracted to those countries by the petrodollars. So these are not real societies or real governments, because they were not existing structures before. Maybe at one stage democracy will come also to these countries, but now there is no need for that. Bahrain is a different country, because the population of Bahrain is equal to the population of from here to Tunal district. A handful of people, most of them are Shiites, and the government is in the hands of the Sunni. So Bahrain is a area of competition between Iran and Saudi Arabia. So Iran and Saudi Arabia have a geopolitical competition in the Gulf countries, particularly in Bahrain. Thank you. Rebwar will talk to you one by one afterwards.
Sorry.
Can we predict democracy in the Middle East in 30 seconds? No. Obviously, it's something I can't answer. You know, how long will it take? Yes, you're right. It's something that develops over time. It's something that's organic and has to come from the people. You have to try on different sizes of democracy to see what fits. It can't be imposed. But Syria, and I can only speak of Syria. That's why I'm here. They have no democratic traditions. It's going to take a long time, I think, coming. And unfortunately, in today's world where everyone is looking for instant gratification, there's going to be a lot of disappointment.
Açık değil tabii. Thank you to all the speakers. Herkese çok teşekkür ederiz. I have two announcements.